ايه؟ Recording in progress.
Good morning, honorable members.
Good morning, Chairperson.
Okay. We only have 1 minute to go. The time is 9 o'clock and the meeting is declared officially open. Let me welcome you, honorable members. I'm informed that Dr. Stoll is going to lead the delegation from DCOC. Any apologies, Portfolio Committee Secretary?
Good morning, Chairperson. Good morning, everybody. Chairperson, there was apologies from Honorable Spies that's still on sick leave, Honorable Opperman, and Honorable Gerike is attending other meetings, and Honorable Tireka will join the meeting a bit later. She's still traveling. There was also apologies from the Minister and both Deputy Ministers, but I see Minister is on the platform. There was a request that the Minister leave the meeting early due to Cabinet meeting. Thank you, Chairperson, and we do form a quorum in the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I will allow I hope members understand the agenda is engagement with the department on the 2022 African Review Mechanism for South Africa, including a report on the flood disaster in January 2024. So that's the agenda for today. I saw initially the hand of the minister. Now I see Honorable Mkhaliphi. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, thanks very much, Chairperson. I accept the agenda, but however, I want the Chair or the DCOC to clarify to who is the head of disaster now, who is heading that unity within the portfolio, within the department.
Okay, let's take the minister as was earlier indicated. She is part of the meeting. I'm sure she will also touch on that, but we are allowing you, Minister, to open and indicate whatever that you want to indicate before you leave. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and good morning, honorable members. Chair, I had earlier raised my hand, but apologies for Secretariat covered me. Of course, Chair, we had submitted an apology for the meeting which was scheduled to start at 9, but it starts at 10. So I felt let me come and join, at least for the hour, and we then go and join the Cabinet Committee, which now commences at 10 o'clock. We appreciate the opportunity to come with the update and the presentation to the Portfolio Committee. Honorable Mkalipi, the head of NDMC, is at the DDG level. Appointed is Dr. Stole, who is present in this meeting. I'm trying to recall when was his appointment, but it was still under the leadership of Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, after the departure of Dr. Dao. If I can try and recall, it should have been in 2022, Dr. Stole may correct me, or at the beginning of 2023. So he has a year plus already having reported to duty and heading NDMC. Honorable Chair, you are correct with honorable members. As per the agenda, we bring through Dr. Stole, who will be heading the delegation, and the presentation is already flighted. We will look into the African peer review and also give to the committee in the second part of the presentation. The honorable members are aware there were January floods which swept through quite a number of provinces in the country. We also will be bringing an update on how far the provinces and the PDMCs are with regard to that, the classification the department that has done, so that the honorable members can also be able to follow through on work that is supposed to do as in part of monitoring and oversight for provinces to do the repair on infrastructure and recovery. We also are in the process, of course, we may not be touching with that at length, of the overall review of the strategy on how we do assessment, with one intention in mind that we usually do a provincial assessment and then we get DWS or ourselves and then to come, but rather we must streamline that. When we start with the assessment in an integrated manner, all of us as departments must be there so that we shorten the application process towards the approval, so that the recovery and the rework can commence immediately after whatever type of floods would have happened. And we try to bring life to normality to the affected households and families who would have been ravaged either by floods or fire or any form of disaster. Thank you very much, Chair, for the opportunity. With your permission, I will request that Dr. Stole takes us through the presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Dr. Stole, you can take over.
Thank you very much, Chair. Let me just share my face. Chair, I joined NDMC towards the end of 2022, which is November. And the minister is correct. I've been with the NDMC now more or less a year. I've worked for Gauteng Province for 10 years as a head of the Provincial Disaster Management Center for Gauteng Province. Chair, thank you very much. Morning to honorable members, ministers, colleagues. Chair, I will be briefing the Portfolio Committee on the overview on the 2022 Africa Peer Review Mechanism for South Africa. We've been working with different departments in terms of the contributions. The DPSA is the country focal point for this IPRM. And secondly, I'm also taking the Portfolio Committee on the January 2024 floods, which affected different provinces, of course, starting from September 2023. The next slide, just see why my slide is not moving. Okay. The next slide, we are presenting the outline of the presentation. I will be presenting the purpose, the introduction and overview of the 2022 IPRM process, and also out of that report of the 2022, there are recommendations related to disaster management. And number 4, we then also present the brief on the flood response coordination, which affected different provinces. And lastly, we'll be then talking to recommendation. The next slide, the purpose of the presentation is to brief the portfolio committee on how COCTA is addressing the recommendations on disaster management in the Africa peer review mechanisms, the South Africa second generation counter review reports. The second part of the presentation, as I've indicated, will then be the brief on disasters covering the period from September 2023 to date that occur in the Eastern Cape, Western Cape, and KZN, including the collaborations by organs of state in terms of responding to those disasters. The next slide, addressing the brief overview. Here, Chairperson, we are saying that the IPRM is a mutually agreed upon instrument voluntarily acceded by member states of the African Union as a self-monitoring mechanism. It was established in 2023 with a view of promoting peer accountability and also sharing best practices amongst the AU heads of state. The second generation country review took place at the IPRM forums of the heads of state and government on the 4th of February 2022. Then South Africa became the first country to be peer reviewed on the 5th thematic area of state resilience to shocks and disasters. Then in June 2022, the Cabinet adopted the National Plan of Action, and then several recommendations were tabled for South Africa to address the following objectives. Objective 1 is the enhancing disaster risk knowledge for resilience to shocks and disasters. Objective 2, governing disaster risk and resilience to shocks and disasters. Objective 3, investing in resilience to shocks and disasters. Objective 4, the preparedness response and building back better in recovery, rehabilitation, and reconstruction. The next point, progress on the implementation of the recommendation is provided on the following areas. Number 1, we'll be presenting the update disaster information management platforms, systematic risk and vulnerability assessment, multi-hazard early warning systems, improving dialogue and cooperations amongst scientific and technological communities and policymakers. 2, the review of the National Disaster Management Act to give stronger legislative powers to the future form to manage, lead disaster management and coordinate disaster responses, preparedness, recovery, reconstruction, and rehabilitation. But also we're talking about finances, implement innovative, sustainable, and efficient disaster funding mechanism, such as forecast-based financing, with investment focused more on preparedness than disaster response. Also, centralize the disaster management functions to expedite responses and develop long-term recovery and reconstruction program. Also, increase budget allocation for a disaster recovery facility to build resilience of communities affected by disasters, including their capacities to withstand future shocks and disasters. Lastly, also build organizational capacity in national and local authorities, NGOs, and environmental agencies. The next slide, Chair, is starting now to address the recommendation coming out of the 2022 IPRM report, which is objective 1, the enhancing disaster risk knowledge for resilience to shocks and disasters. The point number 1 and 2 is the work which the National Disaster Management Center has been doing to address the recommendations which are coming out from that report, but this one focusing on this objective 1. Maintain and update disaster information management platforms. Since 2022, the National Disaster Management Center has worked on improving National Risk Information Platform by ensuring that the national web-based platform housed at the National Disaster Center is operational, updated with enhancement of risk information data, and widely accessible to provincial and district disaster management entities. But also the NDMC has completed a set of key indicative risk profile for South African major hazards, for example, like your drought, floods, fires, and windstorms, and allow national access to this to guide the contingency planning. But also the NDMC has created a centralized repository of information in the form of the special web portal and ICT data center that stores all forms of information. The point number 2, addressing those recommendations, improve hazards and risk vulnerability information. Post the review of 2022, the NDMC undertook to compile previously developed indicative risk profiles for key hazards, as I've indicated above, onto the digital web platform. They were made accessible to all disaster management stakeholders with district-led training since 2022. But also in 2022, the NDMC also completed a guideline for risk profiling for provincial disaster management entities in South Africa. The next point is the improving dialogue and cooperation with scientific and technological communities to facilitate effective decision-making. We've been working with different stakeholders to make sure that the ELA warning system activities, they are actually enhanced. The NDMC is improving cooperation and dialogue with key stakeholders through updating its current platform portfolio of MOUs and MOAs and SLAs. For example, the NDMC and South Africa Weather Services have signed a new agreement with costs that allow for the development of the new data product that monitors climate variabilities and change impacts. These agreements provide an advancement to core business activities of the NDMC in terms of the early warnings and etc. At the international stage, agreements are in place with partners such as Lesotho and also a UN Office of the Outer Space Affairs, but also UNESCO, Indian Ocean Tsunami Warning and Mitigation System. And also we are participating in the International Charter for Space and Major Disasters. But also the NDMC is in the final stages of concluding the MOU with the National School of Government to facilitate development of programs to capacitate government employees across the 3 spheres of government to better implement the disaster management system. We have agreed with the National School of Government to say these courses must be compulsory for all the SMS members as and when then they're being employed by government. Since 2022, the NDMC developed the National Disaster Management Research Agenda to streamline the disaster risk management research to address the existing gaps and inform policies. The second last point, the above mentioned measures are performed in collaboration with institutions of higher education, research institutions, and sector departments. Several universities are involved. This includes University of the Free State, Northwest University, Stellenbosch University, Venda University, Tshwane University of Technology, and Durban University of Technology. We are providing bursaries for students actually to attend disaster-related and fire services programs to these universities. The NDMC continues to strengthen disaster management training and education through collaboration with the Department of Education to make sure that the curriculum at school level, some of the disaster management activities that are included in the space. The next point is enhancement, the usability and application of the scientific data and information for improving the disaster management functions. As the NDMC, we've been working in this space to make sure that the dashboard are being developed, risk knowledge services, ELA warnings, data and hazard information platform have been enhanced and made widely available since 2022 to ensure that usability of information can be applied to different spheres of government. Wide range of products and services developed by NDMC, as I've indicated in previous slides, are accessible, such as live feeds of weather and daily fire warnings, risk profiles, and compliance information. Also, monitoring tools are available to all provincial and district fire authorities. Below the chair, we're just demonstrating the dashboard which we have and developed at NDMC. The next point, towards the development of the National Loss and Damage Information Platform, efforts to address the disaster loss and damage database was managed via the terms of reference, which was developed by NDMC 2022. Proposal received on this project was beyond the financial capacity of the NDMC. Post-2022, the NDMC is now working with the DFFE to facilitate the conversation around the best approach to address the loss and damage database the country should adopt. I must indicate, Chair, that the DFFE, they've already started work in this space. The next slide, we are saying that future action plans in terms of this objective, either enhancing disaster risk knowledge for resilience to shocks and disasters. The NDMC has plans to further improve its national data repository for risk products. This includes commissioning new hazard products such as seismic and agricultural hazards. When I say seismic, we've seen when you go to Gauteng province towards West Rand, Krugersdorp, we're experiencing small earthquakes, which we normally call them seismic activities, and agriculture hazard and also seasonal outlooks indicators in recognition of changing hazard patterns, extreme events, and the infusion of climate change impacts. There is a plan 2024-2025 activities to ensure that risk products are centrally and easily accessible. Institutionalizing of products and services, the NDMC has ensured that all initiative with stakeholders remains active and costed annually into the procurement plan. And also NDMC will be consulting with key national stakeholders like your Council of Geoscience, as I've indicated, in terms of the seismic activities, but also with the CSIR in terms of the technology which is available in the CSIR and also the South African space agencies, where we are able to get updated some of the warnings which are coming from the space, to improve existing hazard profiles and develop new profiles like seismic monitoring and improving vulnerability indexes. The NDMC collaborated with the CSIR to establish and develop a green book. The CSIR is currently working to streamline the green book in the municipalities, and the green book is also giving input or focusing on the issues of climate change. The cost of these activities will be incorporated into the new MTSF cycle and will reside within the business unit operation plan. The next one is the review of the Disaster Management Act in light of the lesson learned from the COVID-19 pandemic, grant stronger powers to the NDMC and locate it in the presidency. As much as the report, the 2022 APR report recommend for us to review the Disaster Management Act, we decided to start with the process of reviewing the entire or overhaul the disaster management system for the country. Once we finalize that process, then it's going to be easy for us to review the National Disaster Management Act, then, because by then we know exactly which areas which we need to cover and where are the gaps. So the review of the National Disaster Management Act to give stronger legislative powers to the agency to change, lead disaster management and coordinate disaster responses, preparedness, recovery, reconstruction, and rehabilitation. 2, considering the current processes of the review and overhaul, as I've indicated, of the disaster management system, preliminary finding point to the need to review the disaster management legislation to address systemic and structural gaps in the delivery of the function. In line with the recommendation of policies and programs that seek to strengthen the capacity and capability of the local sphere of government, the review of the system is pitched at the national level, which implies that improvement also cover the local sphere of government, because we don't want to have this roiros here at national, but we know that disasters happen at the local space. So as and when we then review the system, we make sure that the capacity, the local sphere of government is well capacitated. Bullet number 4, towards reviewing the system, literature review was conducted to assess scholarly review on weaknesses of the current system and correspondent recommendation. The latter were prioritized by number of citations to inform key strategic objectives. Furthermore, best practices were drawn from benchmarking, like your desktop research, dialogue series, which were facilitated by the DPME against approximately 10 countries. A comparative analysis on the system of respective countries was done against key pillars of disaster management. The outcome was used to conceptualize a fit-for-purpose system for South Africa that centers on introducing controls for improved coordinations, administration, funding mechanism, and delivery model. Chair, you remember around April 22 floods in KZN, NDMC was really criticized in terms of the coordinations. And this process will then enhance and improve the coordination capacity. Cognizance of the multidisciplinary implications of the proposed changes, a reference group comprising of experts from relevant field leading respective work stream has been established to duly advise on the actualization of the new system. And this reference group, it has been established within COGTA, and then we have even experts from other organizations outside of COGTA as well. Parallel to the work of the reference group, consultations are underway through selected IGR structures, provinces, local government through SALGA, and other stakeholders identified as key to success of the project, for example, like your AG. The next slide, talking to implement innovative, sustainable, and efficient disaster funding mechanism, such as focus-based financing with investment, focused more on preparedness than on disaster response. The following measures have been put in place to enhance disaster risk reductions, including preparedness and measures. 1, continuous improvement of the impact-based early warning system through key collaborative efforts with South African Weather Services and other stakeholders to inform, develop, and implement seasonal preparedness contingency plans in recognition of the region's extreme events and climate change. 2, working together with disaster management centers and provinces and municipalities to support organs of state on the development and implementation of disaster management plans, including contingency plans and hazard-specific disaster risk reduction strategies in the wake of extreme events and climate change. Collaborative effort with the DFFE and its entities such as South Africa, SA and BI on the implementation of the national climate change adaptation strategy. We are already working with the Senate on some of the initiatives and projects and proposals to implement the issues of the climate change. Public-private partnership on disaster risk reductions and preparedness to augment inadequate resources, for example, like your human and capital capacity. We've been working with National Treasury in terms of the review of the fiscal framework, which is spearheaded by National Treasury. We've given inputs in this framework to explore the various funding mechanism for preparedness and risk reductions. The next one, the government has prioritized response to disasters. This one is more focusing on the building resilience, but more on the recovery part of disasters. Disaster response grants were introduced with COGTA in 2011 with a baseline of 200 million, and the grants amount have been increasing steadily with allocation for 2023-2024 financial year amounting to 500 million. We are working with social development and human settlement on the issues of the social relief of distress, and also the human settlement on issues of the emergency housing grants, which has been institutionalized as a disaster response fund to enhance rapid and effective response to disasters, focusing on humanitarian relief measures. Bullet number 3, contingencies mechanisms are used as a response to disasters, for example, like your rehabilitations. Between 2017 and 2024, over 8 billion rand has been allocated for disaster interventions to the municipalities and also to the organs of state. Future work in areas of enhancement on financing disasters, finalization of disaster risk financing strategy, as I've indicated in my previous slide, led by the National Treasury, also enhancing risk transfers measures, insurance, focusing more, prioritizing the critical infrastructure, especially in the local sphere of government. Also prioritize disaster risk reduction measures in the existing programs of organs of state as per respective mandate. Establishment of the Climate Change Response Fund, and also improve implementation of existing legislation, for example, enforcing the principle of building back better. Then, Chair, the next slide is then now starting to talk to the responses and coordinations in relation to fires and floods which affected KZN, Eastern Cape and Western Cape since September 2023. Here we are just giving the background in terms of our work, how we manage and do the arrangement and response to disasters. Bullet number 4, early warnings and advisories are regularly shared by the South African Weather Services and further disseminated for early actions and informed decisions, but also heightened the preparedness and disaster risk reduction measures by all stakeholders are crucial, considering the increasing level of disaster risk in the country. The next slide we're presenting now in terms of provinces which has been affected. As of the beginning of September 2023, South Africa experienced severe weather incidents like thunderstorms, disruptive rains, lightning, windstorms, flooding incidences, and fell fires in Western Cape, with the KZN province being the hardest hit. The preliminary damage assessment were conducted by affected municipalities and sectors to determine the magnitude and severity of the impact of severe weather events that occurred in affected municipalities. And it was noted that there was loss of life and damage to properties, infrastructure, and the environment due to severe weather conditions. The NDMC has been coordinating the submission of the reports to analyze and approach National Treasury for funding of the damaged infrastructure where affected organs of state are unable to deal with the effect of the disasters. Then we encourage them only utilizing their own resources. All affected provinces submitted final assessment report. That was now last week, the 16th of February 2024. Submission were received from KZN, Mpumalanga, Free State, Northwest, and Eastern Cape Province. Western Cape Province, Limpopo, and Northern Cape are yet to submit. The NDMC is currently assessing the reports, which will then be submitted to National Treasury for funding considerations. Chair, here we're demonstrating or indicating the provinces which were affected by the floods, the thunderstorm and fell fires between December 2023 and February 2024. On my left-hand side, we've got Free State, Mpumalanga, Eastern Cape, KZN, Western Cape, Limpopo, and Northern Cape, Northwest and Gauteng. We see under Free State, mostly it was affected by thunderstorm and floods. Mpumalanga is thunderstorm and floods. Eastern Cape is storm surge and floods. KwaZulu-Natal is floods. Western Cape is fed fires, and also the informal settlement were affected by fires. Limpopo, thunderstorms. Northern Cape, fed fires. Northwest, thunderstorm. Gauteng, floods, structural fires, and thunderstorm. We've seen Gauteng province, especially in the CBD, where most of the hijack buildings have been affected by fires. In this slide, Chair, we are now starting to present the specifics in relation to the impact, affected organs of state, affected district, and affected persons. Here we are focusing under the KZN. There were 1,711 households which were impacted by floods, and 969 houses which were totally destroyed, and 1,698 partially destroyed houses, and 214 homeless families, and 8,506 affected persons. The fatalities, we had 67 fatalities, 8 missing persons, and 98 injured, and the rescued person was 0. The affected organs of state were human settlement, agriculture, transport, education, and health. These are the affected districts, which was Uthukela, Umzinyathi, Amajuba, Mgungundlo, Kwilembe, Ugu, Kinkajwayo, eThekwini, Zululand, and Herigwara. The total estimated cost of damages was estimated to 9.2 billion, and provinces have been implementing their summer contingency plans. During those floods, provincial jogs and district jogs were activated to monitor the situations, and all these reports that were submitted on the daily basis during that time. The next slide is focusing on the Eastern Cape. The impact to the Eastern Cape, the thunderstorm and heavy rains, 455 houses which were affected to those municipalities, and 37 shacks were affected in those 2 districts, and then damaged electricity infrastructure, especially in OR Tambo district and Jokabi district municipality, and a lot of bridges, they were flooded. If you go to Eastern Cape, because I've been spending a lot of time in Eastern Cape, you tend to find that when you go to villages, we have got a low-lying bridges. Sometimes these are the bridges that end up being affected by floods. The affected sectors is the ESCOM, human settlement, and DSD, and also the KSD local municipality. And those are the affected districts and local municipalities under the Eastern Cape. The fatalities, affected persons, we had 13 fatalities, 3 missing persons in Banshe, and 7 injured in that municipality, and then 0 rescued. The estimated cost of damages is 3 billion, the same as I've reported to the previous slide in terms of the contingency plans and the jogs. The next one is the Western Cape. Predominantly, Western Cape was affected by fed fires in those affected districts, and the affected persons, there were 2 fatalities. Affected sectors is the local government, social development, SASSA, infrastructure, Department of Economic and Development and Tourism, and Department of Health and Education. The next slide, also focusing on the Eastern Cape in terms of the affected areas, and those are the municipalities which were affected. In terms of progress on interventions, assessment were undertaken, funding requests submitted to the NDMC, and all due processes were followed, and National Treasury approved the release of 140 million for the disaster grants to address the effect of the floods in affected areas. I must indicate that when you come to reconstruction and rehabilitation grants, this time around, Eastern Cape is the province which is most benefited, close to 600 million. The next one is Mpumalanga, not really that much affected. 8 households, including 2 RDP houses affected in the city of Mbombela, and then 32 households affected in the Tabatweu local municipality, 129 households affected in Bushbuck Ridge local municipality, 0 fatalities, 0 missing persons, 0 injured, and 0 rescued. The department which are affected is human settlement. Affected district, those are the municipalities which were affected. Limpopo also affected some of the villages there. 55 households affected in Makando municipality, 103 households affected in Tulamela, in Musina. The report is submitted also in Colin Shaban local municipality. And some of the schools, they were affected in the creches in the Popo. Also, we don't have any fatalities, missing persons, and persons injured and rescued. Affected sectors, human settlement, social development, education, public works, and health department. These are the districts which were affected with Vembe and then Waterberg. Gauteng, affected by floods in Sedibeng, city of Johannesburg, Ekuru Lane, and West Rand. And normally we know that in COJ, always when there's heavy rains, the communities of Alex are being affected by Chaske River there. And then Alexandra in Sipetla, informal settlement, 50 shacks were affected, and 12 and 16th Avenue, 219 dwellings were also affected, that including Denver informal settlement. In Kuruleni's Hospital View, Tembisa, and the bridge were affected, and the West Rand as well, in Mutlakane, and Mohale, and Rietfontein, 10 shacks. Affected persons, 1,250, and we don't have fatalities, but we have got 3 people injured and 4 rescues rescued. The affected sectors, human settlement, Department of Social Development and Road and Infrastructure. These are the municipalities which were affected: City of Johannesburg, Kuruleni, Metro, Sedibeng, and West Rand District. Northwest, we have been working very close with Northwest, because we've realized that when we have got failed fire, some of the challenges are being experienced in terms of responding to failed fires. But we're working with the fire protection associations in the Northwest to make sure that we deal with incidences of fire. 417 houses' roof were blown away and the roads were eroded. We don't have any fatalities, missing persons, 8 persons injured, and person rescued. Sectors affected: education, infrastructure, health infrastructure, and telecommunication, and also electricity. These were the district which were affected: Dr. Kenneth Kaunda, Bonjanala Platinum, Dr. Ruth Sokomozi. Free State, these are the houses which were affected: 864, and 54 households affected since 26 December. But I know that we've been working with Free State Province to deal with the issues of the affected persons. And when you go to the affected persons, we had 2 fatalities there, no missing persons, 33 people injured and no rescued. Affected sectors, the human settlement, especially on the issues of displacement and also the infrastructure damage, and also the disruption of the community's lives as well. The roads, increased potholes, isolation of communities, especially when roads have has been washed away or the bridges have been affected, and also the disruptive in terms of the movement of goods and services. Also the Department of Water and Sanitations and DARD, which is crop damage. As you know, Free State, sometimes but it is predominantly agricultural based as well. These are the affected district: Mangaung, Harib, Fesritabi, Ichoreputa, Thabo Masonyana. Those are districts which were affected. Here, Chair, we are just we're indicating the classification which we normally issue to allow the sector department to reprioritize their budgets and grants to assist the affected communities. But if there's a shortfalls, then they will then approach the National Disaster Center to augment those shortfalls. Here, Chair, is a visual demonstration of the work which has been done on the ground, funded by the disaster grants. Here it is on Gungudlovu, in KZN. The next one is in the Eastern Cape, Nyandeni local municipality, where we are replacing all the low-lying bridges or the bridges which has been washed away. We're then replacing them and making sure also all the roads which has been eroded, then we are recovering those roads as well. Strategic support to support implementation of intervention, including realization of the desired impact. We are working with MISA to assist us in terms of the damage assessment, reporting preparedness of funding requests, also activation of provincial project steering committee, which includes the key stakeholder, which is COPTA, MISA, infrastructure units, Office of the Premier, municipal PMUs, provincial treasury, and other departments as well for strategic support, monitoring of the interventions, reporting and accounting for allocated funding. We have established this provincial steering committee to deal with issues of delays of reports to be submitted to the National Disaster Center, ultimately us approaching National Treasury if there's a request for funding. So our turnaround, it has improved compared to the past because of these committees. Engagement with accounting officers and decision makers, escalation and intervention to address challenges, because we've realized some of the MMs in the municipalities, they were not really keen to go the route of emergency procurement. Those are the issues which we normally manage it with them. Point number 4, promote building back better principle to ensure sustainability and resilience within communities. Support implementation of existing regulatory framework in the planning and implementation of interventions, for example, like your building codes and also NEMA legislation as well. Strengthening oversight and accountability in implementation of disaster interventions. Strategic support through the ICDM, which is led by COCTA, is chaired by the Minister, and also active participation by Auditor General in the auditing of allocated funds, including in the introduction of the real-time auditing to ensure faster and more responsive engagement in changing circumstances. The second last slide, Chair, it is recommended that the Portfolio Committee takes note of the progress made by COCTA to address recommendation by the Africa peer review mechanisms regarding disaster management, South Africa's second generation counter review reports. 2, takes note of the brief on disaster covering the period from September 2023 to date that occur in the Eastern Cape, Western Cape, and KZN, including collaboration by organs of state in response to disasters. Chair, thank you very much. I think, yes, this is my last slide. Chair, thank you very much. There's a presentation from COCTA, Chair, on behalf of the Minister. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We have noted the report. Honorable members, it's your turn now to engage with the report. I see Honorable Smale, you're number 1. Can you?
Thank you.
Honorable Mkhalip will come in. Yes.
Thank you very, very much, Chair, and thank you to the team COCTA. I think it's probably one of those meetings or those sessions that should be high up on the agenda of COCTA, taking into account that climate change is affecting our country, but also our neighboring states in this regard. Just for record keeping and some of the questions and information, that I will be answering to or putting questions forward to the department relates also to parliamentarian questions that I have personally submitted in the last 4 months, which is question 3220, question 3646, and question 3841, pointing out to some of the inefficiencies and some of the concerns that are being raised, and what I would say is not taking into account some of the support interventions that might need to take place. Chairperson, if one evaluates, if one needs to look at disaster, one of the two biggest factors when we are looking at the livelihood and the people who lost their lives is how we react in the first 48 hours and how quickly our teams has got to be in. And I think one of the biggest concerns that I might have, and not to say that the NGOs don't play a pivotal role within the disaster space, is the access or the ability by our own workforce to be able to act accordingly. And in saying this, the department says that in 2022, it has put together a updated data information that tells you what is accessible to the disaster center. And in my questions to the minister and the answers back by the DG on that, and that is when we looked at the vacancy rate, that one would say that the vacancy rate, and I will read that to you, your chairperson, in that regard. If one would evaluate the vacancy rate, it says the department do not have the details available of the vacancy rates of aeronautical or maritime rescue, as it believes that those functions lies with the Department of National Transport. And if you've got a database and you are supposed to work, you need to manage a disaster that's on your doorstep, and you've got to act within that first 48 hours. I question myself, Chairperson, why is it not why is the National Disaster Management Center, why don't we know what are the capabilities of our supporting structures and their skill sets in order to deal with a disaster? Because every specific disaster needs a specific skill set in order to deal with those things. If one goes further to the questions and we talk about urban rescue, the response by the department is that only the Western Cape and Gauteng province has got the necessary classification and support and qualification and tools to deal with it. It's I will quote unquote, the Department of Cooperative has initiated capacity assessment that exists nationally into urban search and rescue. And it talks to, if you evaluate that urban search and rescue, only 2 of our provinces meets the minimum norms and requirements within that state. And it is very concerning if you take Gauteng and Western Cape out, that one of the biggest areas that were hit was the KZN and other provinces. And then what are we doing to make sure that we meet the necessary accreditation in that regard? I think one of the biggest problems that we have got currently, Chairperson, is that national budgets and policies do not make clear or doesn't express itself clearly enough towards once a national disaster actually hits. There's a heavy reliance on maybe, say, district municipalities to come up with some of those issues. But in order for us to be able to deal with those consequences, you need immediate relief. You need immediate financial relief, and it talks to our ability to respond. So my question to the team: is there a need for us to look at possible amending the Act to speak to how we deal with humanitarian and emergency centers? One of the biggest concerns that we are, if you look at the United Nations and you look at INSARAG guidelines, you would see the heavy reliance on the capabilities and the support mechanisms of our disaster centers, and not to take away from Gauteng towards the Western Cape. But currently, from a human resource point of view, we are extremely weak. And what is it that we are doing to try to meet those minimum standards? Chairperson, I want to give you an example. So when the floods hit KZN, in the USARSA 1 team, 01 team, which is probably the highest decorated team that was put together by DERCO, was only deployed about 2 weeks later into that space. So from a point of when we look at disasters, I wonder why we're not acting quick enough using the the highest decorated team within our disposal. And then it speaks to how we effectively manage our data system and putting a data system together. So, DG, what are we doing to make sure that we've got a complete data system available on the hour, on the skill set, on the capabilities of from movable equipment towards accredited individuals? Chairperson, I do think there will be a need for us to look at those type of data and those type of organograms within this portfolio. And currently, when we look at firefighters in Gauteng, we will work on one individual over 4,000, one over 13,000 in some of the other provinces. And it's clear that the methodology that we are using are not in line as the proclamation of the R153, as the proclamation R153 that has been proclaimed. So what are we doing simply to meet those obligations, Chairperson? One of the other biggest concerns that I have got is that the disaster management protocol that has been put together by SADC, which allows for international and African disaster teams to support us, or we support them. that MOU has not yet been signed, and which limits or which puts a limitation not only in time, but for people to come into that space to operate. Chairperson, what I would also want to hear from the team, what are we to have effective teams means that we have got to have we need to expose teams to real training. And a real training means that we have got to send people to affected areas, not just only in South Africa, because we can't just wait for the next flood, or we can't just wait for the next earth treming like in what happened in Morocco. You've got to be able to send certain teams to deal with that urban rescue and those qualified individuals. So what are we doing to improve our exposure for our current servicemen or women in that field? One, are we setting aside certain budgets? And Chairperson, are we setting certain budgets aside towards upskilling our firemen and our men out there? Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. Honorable Mkhaliphi.
Thank you very much, Chair. Greetings to the minister, if he's still here, because she said she's going to go to attend another meeting, and the deputy ministers who are here, if they are here, and the team from the COC that is led by the DG. Chair, the reason why I was asking from the beginning of the meeting who is the head of disaster management at the national level is because I think all of us here in the portfolio committee can agree that we are waiting for disaster at any time. You wake up in the morning, you think the weather is 23 degrees Celsius, but during the day it's changing to something else. So we need to be updated on what is happening in terms of ensuring that we are prepared to deal with the disasters in South Africa. However, Chairperson, we are. I'm also welcoming the report, the presentation by the new head, which is Babu Stole, and I think we must also welcome Babu Stole since the departure of Dr. Dow. I think when the disasters started in 2022, in May 2022, the unit was led by, I can't remember her name, but a person from the COC, or who was updating in terms of what is the national disaster is doing. So Babu Stole, we have not interacted with him as a portfolio committee, and I think it's proper to say we are happy to know that there is a person who is responsible for this unit, which is quite important. Chairperson, the report, I think, Babu Stole, you'll agree with the committee when we say that the report overall key recommendations relates to the need for the country to strengthen its disaster risk responses capabilities. The report that technical and scientific data on the most recurrent hazard is often fragmented and outdated. And you spoke about it lengthy in your presentation. You even said that you are working with some of the universities in South Africa, whereby you also allow students, or you give bursaries to students, because we need to have this data. Without this technical and scientific data, I don't think we are going to be able, as this unity, to be the leading one in order to deal with the issues of disasters. So we need this updated scientific data all the time, let alone that we are here in South Africa experiencing this kind of climate change which lead to disaster. We are expected as well as a country to contribute in terms of this presentation where we take it to Africa as member states. So we must get our house in order, Babu Stoda. I think you'll agree with me on that one, because if our house here in the country is not in order, how are we expected to contribute meaningfully outside South Africa, in Africa as a whole? So the other part of your presentation talks about, I think it was basically the updates since the last floods, of which took place this year. There was an ad hoc committee chair that was established by Parliament in order to look to this thing of floods. And I remember very well, because even the researcher of this portfolio committee, also a researcher in that other committee, I think there was also a suggestion that we must have this floods committee to be a permanent committee as well, because today you establish an ad hoc, you say this ad hoc must be 3 months, but after 3 months is another floods or is another disaster that is taking place in the country. So your unit, Babu Stole, is become very important. But some of the things that you mentioned in your presentation, like I heard you briefly saying, when you put up a steering committee, a team from your unity, some of the officials, like the MMs and some of the decision makers, they don't want to participate in the disaster risk reduction governance structures. That one, it's also a challenge on its own. And I would love if the minister is still here, or the DG will also maybe come in and also clarify, what do we do if we come across with such things? Because one, when we experience some floods or disaster, if I may put so, to Chairperson, the first thing that we do, we don't even call the National Disaster Management Unit. We called the one that is in municipalities. The last visit that we visited in Gauteng, in one of the municipalities, we were told that they don't have that unit in the municipality to start with. That was the first challenge that we encountered. That they don't even exist. They don't have that such unit in some of the municipalities in the district level. The second part of it, when you call them to say there is this people who are affected now as we speak and we need some intervention, the usually response is that they don't have resources. And here, at some point at a national level, there was some disturbing news that there was money that were turned back to the national treasury, while the people on the ground are suffering. So I just want to make that observation. But when Mr. Stolle was also doing the presentation, I think he also showed us some of the projects that the unity is implemented there in Umgungundlovu. But I think the information, Chair, we don't get it as members of Parliament. Maybe if you can clarify, Tukuta, how far does the unit can go in order to implement some of the projects that people were affected by floods, like the one that he was showing us here of Umgungundlovu? How does it work? Do you coordinate with the local council or municipality? You use your funds as the National Disaster Management and you go and implement those projects. How does it work? Because we really need to have that information. As members of this portfolio committee, if we do have this information, Chair, we could have also done the oversight on those projects, but we are not aware because the information does not come forth. I think the previous member who spoke here, he was quite correct to say this unity is very important and it must be on top of the agenda of this committee. As I'm alluded to the fact that we are experiencing these disasters on daily basis, Chair. So my question is that, how do you coordinate with local municipalities? How far do you go? What is your mandate? How does your mandate stretches? Because one, I learned that you take information, let's say councillors, they give you information, or members of parliament or any public rep said, no, this community of Ward 53 Amaud have been affected. They lost their houses, they lost everything. Then you compile a list and you took that list to different departments. For instance, let's say Chairperson has lost his house. So the first department that needs to be engaged is the Department of Human Settlement and Housing. So when is a disaster, how far do you go to ensure that Mr. Kasa lost his house and then he got his house? I'm saying this, Chair, because you are saying that KZN was the one who was experienced most of the difficulties in terms of this thing. And when you calculated, it costed 92 billion. Eastern Cape affected houses were 455 and so on. How do you monitor that those 455 houses that were reported from Eastern Cape as affected houses did get their housing? Because you are going to tell me that no, but honorable member, you know very well that as disaster, we don't provide houses. But how do you coordinate with other departments? Because according to our experience here, as members of this portfolio committee, is that we report things and then you play your part, send that information to your sister's department. But at the end of the day, people remain affected. There is no feedback from those departments. Kanti, if you can, also implement some of the projects. Can we be told, Guti, how far can you go and implement those projects? Which one? Because here you showed us roads. Do you build houses if the Department of Human Settlement does not? Do you provide things such as SASA grants? I mean, the vouchers. As we speak now, the recent floods. Let me make an example of Mawuti Ward 57. They have compiled a list. They send it to eThekwini disaster. The disaster of eThekwini have took that list to the department, to SASA. And SASA is the one who's supposed to issue out those vouchers. But we are told that SASA has ran out of budget as well. So how do you coordinate all these things in order for an affected person and say that, no, I was assisted by the government? Maybe let me just pause the chair. Thanks.
Very much, Honorable Msimango.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. Greetings to the Minister in her absence. I think she has just left now. Greetings to the Deputy Ministers on the platform. Greetings to the colleagues and, of course, the officials that are present in this platform. I want to first welcome the report, but also concur with the latter speaker by welcoming Babu Ustole. I know Babu Ustole in my previous portfolio, or in my previous work that I used to do in Gauteng. We used to meet at Stretla when there are these disasters, so I know exactly what he is capable of, and I must say you are welcome, and I think this unit is lucky to have somebody like you who is very passionate about this work. Previous speakers have managed to touch part of what I wanted to ask. My question, therefore, would be: as the department, are we satisfied with the set of skills that we have in different provinces or in different municipalities? Because for us to be able to make sure that we respond well in these disasters as and when they hit, we must be able to say, with what we have in terms of the skills, we think we're ready. We think we're able to make sure that we match whatever challenge that will be coming. Boss, I'll give you an example. I think it used to be Department of Housing. It was located in Sawa, in city of Johannesburg, Sawa Street. When that building burned, we had a challenge of one of the firefighters that could not make it. Then, of course, you can label it as it's either maybe that it was just one of those incidents that was not going to be avoided or whatever. But I'm saying, are we as the department happy with the sets of skills that we currently have? Because we are bound to face other disasters, and that we cannot run away from. But of course, if you don't have correct skills in these levels, be it province or municipality, you will definitely not be able to respond accordingly because of you don't have skills. And I think Honorable Smile is correct that perhaps we need to look into that, but also try and make sure that we take it further by trying to expose those that we already have in the unit to deal with disasters as and when they come, to be exposed to other maybe be it outside the country, or give them more training in order to make sure that they are able to better deal with these disasters as and when they come. So when I'm trying to shorten my question to say, do we have a clear picture of what do we have in terms of the skills that we have in this in these levels, province or the municipality, in order for them to deal with these disasters? Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much. I have noted that the Deputy Minister for Traditional Affairs, Honorable Namashe, is in the meeting. Let me acknowledge you and any other member who I might not have seen. Well, the Portfolio Committee Secretary will draw my attention. I think now is the time for responses. If the minister is still around, wants to make some comments, DMs if he's not there, and then we allow Dr. Stolle. Over to you, Minister, Deputy Minister.
Minister already left.
The Chair, Minister has asked to be excused at 10
Yes.
in the beginning. Yes, I think she has joined the Cabinet subcommittee. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, then the DM, do you have anything before Dr. Stolle?
Sorry, Chair, perhaps with your permission, can we maybe start with Dr. Stolle and then end up with DM and DG?
Yeah, it's fine. You can do that.
Thank you, Chair. Dr. Stolle.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair and the DG. Chair, I'll start with Honorable Smale's questions in terms of response within 48 hours. What we have done, maybe let me link it with the Gauteng and Western Cape capability, which we have established. I fully agree to say previously, and something which we are dealing with it now, that when disasters happened, you tend to see NGOs being there on site first. And you find that then municipalities, then they will respond later on. Chair, this issue, it was even raised by our DG Njangan, in terms of why it takes so long in terms of response. Not only that, he even take it even further in terms of we need to correct the issues of assessment. Coming back to the question, yes, as part of our review process for the review or overhaul of the disaster management system in the country, this is the issue, Chair, which we are going to make sure that we close the gap, the response capability, because we've realized that there is a gap there because of the capacity at a municipality level. But with our review process, which we're going to present to Cabinet towards the end of March this year, we've already indicated that how we're going to improve the response capability when we have to respond to disasters. The second question on the issues of the database of the maritime, the Department of Transport is a member of the National Disaster Management Advisory Forum. They always come to the meeting and present update and progress in relation to the maritime activities. Maybe then what we can do, we can also duplicate that database from the department. Then we have it, also that database at NDMC level as well. But we are working very closely with the Department of Transport in terms of all the maritime-related disasters or incidences at that level. The issue of urban search and rescue. We established a team in 2007 in Gauteng, and then it was classified by INSRAC. Is a third medium team classified by UN in Africa. The one is Morocco and Algeria, and then South Africa. The idea was to make sure that this team, it comprises all the experts and capabilities from all the provinces across the country. While you have Gauteng province and Western Cape having this active capability of urban search and rescue. In 2010, when we were planning for the World Cup, the National Disaster Management Center donated user equipment to Gauteng and also to the Western Cape to establish that kind of a capability. Since from then, the two provinces, they've gone through the process of establishing this capability. But I must indicate now, since from last year, there is a process which we have put in place to make sure that provinces like KZN and other provinces, they establish also the urban search and rescue capability as well. And I know there was some training provided some time ago by the National Disaster Management Center, and then we have augmented that kind of training to make sure that those provinces, they have got this kind of capability. But the bigger picture, Honorable Chair, is to have a multidisciplinary South African team. Even though this team for Gauteng, when you go to the INSRAC website, is classified as a South African team. But that team is made up of Gauteng municipalities in terms of technicians who are participating in the urban search and rescue team. But there's already a process which we have put in place as a National Disaster Center to make sure that other provinces that develop the capability, but also we have got now a heavy, because this team is a medium one, but we have a heavy urban search and rescue team classified again by INSRAC, so that then we are able to deal with the issues of response. If something happened within 48 hours, we should be there on the ground, because the guideline for INSRAC is very clear. If something happened, this team must respond before any other team from any other country can come in. That one I've dealt with. Yeah, in terms of the amendment of the Act, as I've indicated in the presentation, that definitely there is a need to amend the current Act, the Disaster Act, because our preliminary literature review and assessment and work in the space of reviewing of the disaster management systems, we've realized that there is a need for us to review the Disaster Management Act. So we are going to make sure that we review the Act as well. The issue of the SADC protocol, there is a process which we are busy with. This week or next week, there's a meeting with DIRCO to finalize the issue of the MOU, but the project manager, Mayor Golokoto, will also come after me. I requested her to speak on the specifics. We've drafted a cabinet memo, and also we've engaged all the stakeholders. The only department which we still need to engage is Treasury. So our DG advised us to say, before we go to cabinet, let's consult with National Treasury as well, so that when we go to present to cabinet, we're not asked whether we have presented to National Treasury, because there is financial implication there. So we have now arranged a meeting with National Treasury to present this MOU. Once we conclude on that process, because we've already engaged the National Disaster Management Advisory Forum, and then also the DG indicated that we might need also to have a second round with the South Africa Weather Services on this MOU. So we are definitely moving on this issue of the SADC protocol to make sure that as a country we sign this MOU. The exposure to of the team to the real training, our team leaders rather, for the urban station rescue team, we send them to simulation exercises which are conducted in different countries. What we're planning to do in the next financial year is to have a simulation exercise here, the bigger one, the counter one, here in South Africa, where we can involve the SNDF, the SAPS, fire services, rescue capability of the SAPS here in South Africa. But our team are already participating to all the trainings in different countries in relation to urban station rescue team. Yes, we have not exposed the entire team to those kind of trainings, but what we have agreed in our management committee of this team is that we'll then make sure the mentors, as they come to South Africa, and some of the trainers will then expose this team to some of the training, and then also the drills and the exercises, so that we then expose our team as well. The next issue is the issue of setting aside the budget. We thought, yes, we are receiving a budget as part of the allocation, as we are part of COCTA. But as we finalize our review process, the review or the overhaul of the disaster management system in the country, is one of the issues which we said we want to propose to have got a ring-fence budget. And that budget will then be used or utilized to finance or fund or procure fire engines. Because right now, when you've got fires in different provinces, you tend to find that we have a challenge in terms of responding fully to those fires. So we're going to procure the fire engines, but any other equipment which we might need, but also augment this urban station rescue equipment which we have. The question from Honorable Mkhaliphi, yes, Honorable Mkhaliphi, maybe from our side, what we can do, we could actually include the portfolio committee members in our early warnings, either WhatsApp or communication. We can devise a mechanism how we can share these weather updates, specifically the impact-based early warnings, which we received. Because previously we used to get what we call it early warning, which tells you in KZN tomorrow or later this afternoon, we will receive rains. But the impact-based early warning is even go further. It can even give you an indication to say, we are saying KZN, in KZN where in Utugela, and where in Utugela in Afreduma local municipality. So this early warning system which we have now, we can actually zoom into that particular municipality, which then helps us in terms of advising those communities which might be affected if it's going to rain in that area. Yes, the issue of whether the country needs to strengthen the response capability. I've indicated that when I talk about the response capability, yes, but also maybe let me indicate that as part of the review process, we've realized that when we go to provinces and the municipalities, they don't have capacity. I will make an example. When you go to Northern Cape, the head of the center there is at the deputy director's level, and they don't have manpower at a provincial level to assist and support the municipalities. When you go to the municipalities, you tend to find in other municipalities a traffic officer. They will say, well, he's a traffic officer, but also he has been given a responsibility to coordinate disasters. So it becomes by the way, but for my stance is that we're no longer going to allow a situation where someone manages disaster at a local level, like by the way. We want someone who's going to be appointed, dedicated, and focus on disaster management, because we deal with people's lives. Because when disaster happens, people die, people are being affected. So we can't just manage it as by the way. So as NDMC, our stance is very clear. We've made that decision very clear to the municipal managers that this is what we want, this is what we're expecting from them. And then they are working on the process to make sure that if there's no structure, the structure must be established. And then people must be appointed there. The issue of the flood committee, honorable member, we do have the flood committees. But my team, they've also suggested that let's not have a permanent flood committees, because we have the NGFCC, which is chaired by myself. We've got the extended NGFCC, which is chaired by the DG. Then we have got ICDM, which is also a structure focusing on disasters and floods, which is chaired by the minister. But then we agreed at national to say, no. When we are experiencing floods, one hazard, but there are a number of areas which we can improve. When floods happens, the impact of those floods are being minimized. So we have now activated a disaster management planning committee, which will then deal with issues of risk reductions, disaster management planning around, in terms of if we have to engage the traditional affairs colleagues in terms of the chiefs as they allocate the stands and so on, then they must take into consideration the risk assessment which that municipality would have conducted in terms of, this is a floodplain area, don't put the people there. You can then recycle people there or cycle people in these areas as well. Okay, I think that other issue which I just want to indicate before I allow my colleagues to come in is the issue of the projects. Those slides, honorable member, which I've indicated. These are projects which are funded by disaster grants. So how it works, disaster happened in the particular municipality in the ward. Then the team from the municipality will then dispatch a team to go and do the assessment. And the assessment is going to be conducted in that space. A report is going to be compiled in terms of all the infrastructure damage, roads, people affected, and so on and so on and so on. But while that thing is happening, you will then have a situation, maybe communities, their roofs, roof houses have been blown away, or their houses have been affected. Those ones then have been reallocated or relocated to community hall or any other structure which we'll identify in that ward. I'm zooming into the ward level so that it's very easy. Then human settlement, because we will then establish the JOC. There will be a JOC at the municipality level. Then human settlement is going to be there. Department of Social Development is going to be there. Department of Health is going to be there. So all the departments are going to be there. Then we will then say, in the meeting of the JOC, we have got 10 wards which has been affected. This ward, I'm just making the ward number 1, is only houses which have been affected. The roads are intact. This ward, it needs assistance from women settlement in terms of relocation of the people who have been affected. Then human settlement will take that component related to housing. Then the Department of Social Development, if SASSA is there, we then also come in and say, okay, we are going to assist the communities in terms of the food parcels and so on. Then the Department of Health will then come in and say, in terms of our database, we know that in this municipality, in this ward, we've got X number of people who are getting chronic medication. Now, because that medication is now washed away by water and so on, we then have a process where we allow those people to come and give their name to us and their IDs, then we can reissue those chronic medications. So the point which I'm stressing is that it starts with a jog being activated when there is an impending rains, or we have received the early warning from South Africa Weather Services, the jog is being activated. Then if something has happened, the jog is active, all the stakeholders are there. Then we come up with then we do the assessment. Out of the assessment, then we assist the community in terms of humanitarian relief. Once the process has been concluded, on the other side, there is a consolidated report which is going to come out of the municipality. And that report gets submitted to the Provincial Disaster Management Center. And the colleagues there, they will then also go and verify the kind of information, and thereafter they submit it to us as well. I know our DG has been very vocal in terms of the timeline which it takes in terms of that assessment, but we have dealt with the issues of timeline in terms of the turnaround time, how we conclude in terms of that report. Then once we receive that report from National, then the team from National will then verify the information and all those things. Then they will then indicate this issue to National Treasury. But there's another process, because I've talked about the provincial steering committees. Those committees then, they will then take that report and look in detail in terms of which project need to be funded and so on. Then there would be an application process which need to be completed as well. And thereafter then submitted to National Treasury. Once National Treasury release that amount, of course, if you submit a request for 2 billion, National Treasury, they can come back and say, well, we don't have that kind of money, but we can assist you with maybe 200 million. And then once we receive that figure, then there's that process. There's a process of reprioritization of project in the first report. Then we have a final report, and there's a final report which we then work with. Once then Treasury fund those projects and the money is being transferred to the municipalities directly. Our role is to make sure that what municipalities have committed in the application for funding, those projects get implemented on the ground. That's why we come in as NDMC. We go to the municipality, we sit down with them, we give them timeline when this project must be concluded. Number 2, also the NDMC, we do site visit. Visiting all those projects to make sure that all the projects which municipality committed, those projects are being implemented and then concluded. That's how we manage this process. But Honorable Chair, if maybe there's that kind of a request in the future, we could prepare 1 or 2 or 3 slides just to explain that nice process, how it flows up to the point where we come to these pictures which are just presented here to say these are projects which are happening, which are being implemented on the ground. This is how we monitor in terms of process, but there is other process in between which NDMC is also doing. I think this is the last question from Honorable Semang, whether are we happy with the skill sets from province and the municipalities. Honorable Member, I think from our side as NDMC, For all along, there's been a process which we've been conducting in terms of the assessing the capacity of the disaster centers. And we've identified the gaps in provinces, specifically in terms of the home bodies which need to be there, and also at the municipality level. So we are saying through this review process, these are the gaps which we are going to close. Because once we have a review system finalized and we start implementing the recommendation out of the system and the plan or the model coming out of the review, these gaps definitely are going to be closed. With the team, which has been working on this process, we've engaged UN. Yesterday, we engaged UN Habitat. So we are bringing all the thinking from international experience. We engaged SALGA, and we're working with GTEC, all other departments. So even universities are also on board, advising us in terms of what is the best model for South Africa. Because we can go to US and say, we want to implement what FEMA is doing. FEMA is one of the organizations which is implementing disaster and emergencies in US. But South Africa is a different country compared to US. You can go to Russia, EMECOM, but there are lessons learned from FEMA, there are lessons learned from EMECOM, there are lessons learned from China, even from African countries, from Brazil, and so on, which we can take those lessons learned and incorporate it in our model. So that when we implement it, we know we're globally relevant, we're Africa relevant, but also we're talking to the realities of South Africa. Then we have capability which we can stand in the future, Chair, in this committee and say, we can actually manage any disaster which can come into South Africa. Chair, with your permission, maybe let me allow my colleagues, Mayor Kolokoto, before the DG comes in, just to talk on the shock. Mayor Kolokoto?
Good morning, Honorable Chairperson, honorable members of the Portfolio Committee, DG, Changana, and the leadership of the department. I'm just going to add a few points on top of what Dr. Stolle has indicated on the shock. I think the Honorable was asking about maybe the process in terms of how far are we with regard to the SADC arrangements that are put in place to make sure that coordination on humanitarian emergency support across the member states is done or coordinated within that center, the SADC Humanitarian and Emergency Operations Center. The department is currently working on the process. As much as we know that this center is going to provide technical support to national disaster management entities across the region, we want to also mention that the MOA that has been developed to facilitate the processes is an autonomous legal entity within the SADC organization, meaning that it requires that each member state must make sure that they follow their own domestic processes to make sure that they deal with any other related matter that may also commit the government of the Republic in terms of the operations of the shock. For an example, we had to seek legal opinion on the MOA, and then from DERCO and Department of Justice, the state law advisors, they also advised that in terms of the content of the MOA, it falls within section 231, subsection 2 of the Constitution, meaning that the MOA, before the minister can sign it, requires cabinet approval, meaning it has to follow all those processes as well as ensuring that there's also presidential approval, because there are other domestic issues that needs to be resolved maybe internally through the consultations, as Dr. Stolle has indicated, that legal opinion picked in the MOA, such as financial implications that are there, requiring that the operations of that center must be funded by contributions from member states, as well as also dealing with the issues of immunities and privileges, because one of the functions of the MOA requires that once it is signed, the country should be ready as and when it is required to deploy citizens there. So these are some of the things that we are consulting on internally, following South African domestic laws, so that we deal with all these matters before we can submit the cabinet memo to Parliament. But as Dr. Stolle indicated, we have a draft cabinet memo that we are consulting on. We were just about to consult the FOSAT clusters. However, it is required that before we go there, because those are some of the first stages that the memo has to be taken towards a cabinet, because it has to be attended to by both houses of parliament. So we are consulting. Just yesterday, we had a meeting with DERCO, SADC desk in DERCO, that is also providing guidance with National Treasury on how should we deal with these matters, so that when the cabinet memo reaches cabinet, some of these matters have been resolved. This is what I can say, and also confirm that we're working hard. The meeting with DERCO yesterday culminated into separate meeting again with them, maybe next week, where we are going to be sorting out the issue of financial implications, maybe coming up with financial modalities for the country that should also be included in the memo, and also issues of privileges of immunities that are also dealt for by DERCO itself through the minister. So we are working and ensuring that the MOA reaches cabinet, so that the minister can be given permission or approval to sign after all processes have been followed to the core. Thank you, Dr. Stolle and Honorable Chairperson.
Thank you, Mayor Kolokoto. DG, on our side, we've responded to all the questions.
DG.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and thank you very much to Dr. Stolle and Mayor Kolokoto, Jennifer, and the team. Chairperson, I'm adequately covered by my two colleagues on the matter. I think they have answered almost all the questions. I just want to emphasize on two responses, and that will be the MOA and also the capacity of the center, and not just the national center, but also the provincial and the municipal centers, disaster management centers. On the MOA, Chair, it is correct, yes, the DG pulled back that MOU, the protocol, the SADC protocol MOU. It's meant to go to cabinet, but I was not happy about the quality of engagements with the sector departments, especially the core sector departments. In this case, it will be DERCO. As you heard, the team met with DERCO yesterday. It will be environment, and in environment, specifically the South African Weather Services, because that is our strategic partner. And lastly, Treasury and Defense, because Treasury, even if we don't find each other on the financing arrangement, we can look at options. If for instance, Treasury is of the view that the protocol must be financed from our baseline, then we will have to sit down with Treasury and ask ourselves which part of the baseline should be used to fund this protocol. Because in our baseline, you have municipal grants, mainly municipal grants. We have 17 billion rands of MIG, municipal infrastructure grant, and then you have plus minus 100 million rands of equitable share. So the bulk of our baseline is made up of transfers to municipalities. So we suspect that National Treasury is going to ask us to fund this from our baseline, and which is already receiving a lot of cuts, and then you have plus minus 4.2 billion rands of CWP. So we may agree with Treasury on how best to finance this program, but we need to meet with them. Even if we don't agree, we can't go to cabinet without having met and discuss options of financing the protocol. The other part, Chair, and there are a lot of questions that are linked to this one as well, and that Dr. Stoll has done a good job in answering that question, is the capacity of the centers. Are we happy? I think that question was asked specifically. Are you satisfied with the set of skills that we currently have, both at the municipal, provincial, and national? And the answer is no, we're not. And I think Dr. Stoll did answer that question. And linked to that question is the question about coordinating capacity, which was the very first question on the role of the maritime component of transport. After, I guess, 30 years, I think the timing is perfect for us to review the disaster management system of the country. And Cabinet has already asked us to do exactly that, to review the disaster management system of the country. I think there are stopgap measures that we can adopt. For instance, the three-way assessment system that we do can be managed. As you know, when there is a disaster, the affected municipality has to assess and then submit to the Provincial Disaster Management Center, who in turn will submit to the National Disaster Management Center. I think that model can be changed quickly. I don't think it should wait for the system, the disaster management system of the country to be overhauled. So we can start working on that, where if, for instance, a municipality is dysfunctional, we don't expect that municipality to be doing its own assessment. So both the national and provincial disaster management centers can work together to do an assessment on behalf of that municipality. So we can cut down the turnaround time on the assessments. And I think we've done that already. In the latest disaster in the Western Cape, which took place last year in October, by December, the process was concluded already. And I think it was a record time that we were in a position to assess and respond within 3 days. I guess the biggest challenge is sometimes when the disaster application is coming from the province and it's the province that is affected, we tend to experience some problems there because of financial challenges in the disaster response grant. And that's a matter that we are taking up with National Treasury. But I think the timing is perfect for us to overhaul the modus operandi, the system, even review the legislation. I think the process of reviewing the legislation is already underway. We've done some benchmarking, some literature review to look at what's happening in other countries. And I think Dr. Stoll has already made mention of the US, particularly California in the US, not just the whole of the US, where we've looked at how they deal with disasters. Remember, the US, just like the Western Cape, if it's not floods, it's fires. You know, in the Western Cape, we know that in summer it's fires, and in winter it's floods. So we think there's a lot that we can learn. Australia is the same. They deal with fires most of the time, and sometimes with floods. So the team under Dr. Stoll has done a lot of work, a review. DMTAU has also assisted us to interact with some of the international bodies that are specializing in this field. We met with UN Habitat, and they wanted to be given a month or two to see how best they can assist with home bodies and also with funding. So we think that we have it under control, and we've also delayed the submission to cabinet because we wanted to make sure that we've got a credible plan before we get this submitted to cabinet. Chairperson, all the other questions were attended to. The intergovernmental structures, the participation of municipalities, I think all of that has been attended to. We also want to introduce what we call Schedule 6B in this space. In municipalities where there's no capacity, we use MISA or any other government entity to be an implementing agent, because if a municipality has no capacity and it is functional, we can't expect that municipality to do a good job in implementing all the disaster recovery measures. So, Chairperson, that's our submission, and I don't know if DM is here, and if DM is here, maybe we can hand over to DM and then back to you. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. I'm informed the DM is no longer there by the Portfolio Committee Secretary. Any follow-up questions? I see Honorable Smale. Can I take you? Yes.
Thank you, Chairperson. And with reference to shock and the MOA, I'm glad to see that there is some progress, especially that it's been nearly 2 years that those things had to take place. But it's important to note from a funding point of view and from a MOU point of view that you wanted to actually deal with the dispatch of a specific skill set of individuals to a specific requirement, and also the acceptance of maybe outside assistance towards your country. So it talks towards the specific skill set, must talk to the specific equipments that you might want to bring in and out in order to deal with that, because sometimes you only deal with a warm body that you want to take, but there's a requirement towards skill set, towards equipment. When one looks at this, DG, I hope that the discussions and taking into account the real shortcomings, because I hear that we are trying to focus on building capabilities, and that means that the current status is that we are having a shortcoming in that field. That when we do that we look at maybe having a core group of, say, 100 people or 50 people that is available, because you might deal with one disaster on a African continent, but just a week after, while you're busy there, you might deal with a similar disaster in your own country, as disasters might affect it, so that you're not outsource everything you've got, but you actually sit with some of the necessary capabilities. So I'm hoping that you are looking at what would be a core that is needed, that a sort of organogram is being put up in different skills. Chairperson, I think it's also important and a firm request to say that when we put a database together under the management of Cooperative, that you have a clear understanding what are the capacity or the capabilities to your disposal, even if you are including your various sister departments, Maritime, Department of Transport, SAPS, and all of those things, but that you actually look at all the type of equipment in that space that you can deploy within a very short space of time of 48 hours per province. Because I think it's going to be very critical. It's not to say that you want to ask province A or Department A what is their capacity and what have they got available to give to you tomorrow. It should be a database that you look at it and the DG says, listen, I need the following from you because I know you've got the following. And it's that type of information that must be at the hands of the DG looking at real data, real time. So I would ask that we urgently start that process of building that database to deal with any sort of disaster that might come our way. There was still one more, Chairperson, just want to see. When we look at early warnings and some of the issues, and I'm now referring to Lady Smith, and I'm also referring to some of the work that is being done by some of our universities. A lot of research is being done into why certain disasters are actually happening. And in the case of Lady Smith, there was a research document put together in 2016 stating that some of the flat canals had to be upgraded towards certain technical specifications. Some of the overflow of water in the surroundings of the municipality had to be updated. And this requires Cooperative to take note, bringing into MISA into that space. And it's a research document that took effort and time, but it wasn't actually utilized or being implemented by the local municipality or by someone else. And I think there's a miscommunication or a opportunity missed to maybe save lives, and we might have to redirect some of the IDPs or the repriorities of certain municipalities in those business planning. So I think it's just maybe a comment that I wanted to put forward on that space, Chairperson, in that regard. Yeah, I think I've said what I had to say. Yeah, the last one is the training. Chairperson, I take note of the training of team leaders into the various fields, but I know factually that we maybe just train people or the broader teams or the expert teams maybe every 5 years or so. I do think there's a need for a more a different approach and trying to make sure that our teams are ready when something happens. So I will just ask the DG, when you do look at your baseline of fundings, when you look at these things, that we just improve our training opportunities to our disaster centers and especially our skilled teams in this regard. Thank you, Chairperson. Those were comments.
Thank you. Honorable Mkhaliphi.
Ngiyabonga Chairperson. Umember Msimango uncome kakhulu ubaba uSithole, and ke sicela ukuthi sisho Chair ukuthi ngesikhathi uDr. Tau was the head of this unit, was the most accessible official in the department. So ke ngezincomo from Honorable Msimango, we are hoping ukuthi ubaba uSithole sizomthola njengoba sasithola uDr. Tau. Nokho-ke Chairperson uyathembisa futhi mangabe ekhuluma la yenza presentation njengokusho kukababa uMsimango ukuthi ayisinenhlanhla is this portfolio committee to have i-official efana nobaba uSithole. Sithi-ke siyakumukela baba uSithole, and we will work with you kahle going forward sizokhumula no DG ukuthi samukela naye ngoba okwethu nje is to ensure ukuthi the service delivery is taking place. Chair, I will also very happy if we can get that flow chart that Ubaba Sithole was talking about, clarifying in terms of processes. So after floods, after any disaster, disaster ungena kanjani, and then other sisters department bangena kanjani until at the end. As I was alluding earlier on to the fact that there is nothing painful like you go and take a name or a list of names who are affected by a disaster. And then the minute you take that list from those people who are affected by a disaster at that particular time, you raise expectations. You are saying that you are taking these names, you are going to forward it to disaster, and they are going to come and check in terms of the damage. And so if we can get clearly after disaster came in, how does it work until at the end? The second point is that if we can get a list of projects whereby the disaster have implemented, as he was also explaining what is in terms of a grant, and then the National Disaster Management Center is the one who's overseeing projects in one way or other. So we'll be very happy as members of this portfolio committee as well to satisfy ourselves if indeed those projects are running smooth. And as much as
It looks like your network, it's giving problems. Can I assume that we have had Honorable Mkalipi? If she comes back.
I got cut off, Chairperson. I think it's a network.
Okay, yes, you were
Yeah,
cut
I
off.
was concluding by saying, yes, Chair, I was concluding by saying that when I was listening to the DG, I concur because I know he meant well for this unity to be functional. But when you go to the ground, the Chair is not what is DG is explaining. I was making an example of the floods that took place in 2022. It was a disaster on its own. I remember when we engaged on floods ad hoc committee, everything was not according to the plan of the national disaster. I don't know, maybe there's a way forward, Chair, if we engaged again, we can also get a sense on how do you coordinate with the province and with local government for the benefit of the people, because Tina, as members, all of us here, including officials, we will be very happy if we see the service delivery arrived at the doorstep of each and every South African, especially if they are affected by the disaster. Those are the things that I wanted to raise, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I assume that whether there are elements of questions in the follow-ups, but generally they were comments. So I would imagine as well as you respond, you would be also coming closer to making closing remarks. DG and your team. So in other words, there will be no other round now. You are almost talk to the comments. If there were any specific questions, respond to them. And closing remarks as well. Over to you, DG, and your team.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Indeed, most were comments, but we'll respond to the questions as well that have been put forward. There's a proposal for the list to be made available. That can be done. Dr. Stole will make that list available of all the projects that are funded. There was a comment about skills training. Yes, the disaster management team has gone through a number of training programs in this year, the year under review, and they've attended even international programs. They've been to China, Russia, and a number of countries in Europe, Africa, and Latin America to gain experience as well about how disaster is done in other areas, even if we have budget constraints. But we don't think that this team should be affected because they are providing essential services. So we'll continue to train them. And the question about early warnings and linked to Lady Smith, we were there last month with the minister, with the team from MISA, from the province as well. We visited some of the valves, the work that needs to be done on the valves. There's work that is happening already. And we noticed that there's more work that needs to be done to get the valves to perform. But it's not just about the valves, it's also about the silt in the river. I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done to desilt the river, because the river is, if you like, on the northern side of the town. So if the silt is getting up, and it increases the potential of flooding. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done on that river, and that's what was discussed. We looked at the dam as well, or if you like, the way, because I don't think it's operating as a dam, which is also intended to deal with flooding in Ladysmith. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done there to prevent future flooding. The report was read and we went through it. So there's a service provider on site already which is doing some work, but we picked it up that there is more work that needs to be done on the river, but also on the valves, because those valves, they assist in managing the flooding or in preventing the flooding of the town. MISA is already in that municipality, Alfred Duma municipality in Ladysmith. They're doing some work, but more on the what we call the treatment plants, the water treatment plants. They have a 30 million rands project that they are implementing on behalf of the municipality. That can be extended to include disaster management. They are already on site. They are there. The comment on the MOU, I think it's welcomed, and you are quite correct. Dr. Stolle has had an engagement with a number of private sector operators, because there is capacity in the private sector in this country around disaster management, and Dr. Stolle has engaged some of them, has met some of them, and part of reviewing our modus operandi is to try and get private operators, private sector companies, whether it's fire or it's floods. There are quite a number of companies in South Africa who are operating in that space. We want to bring them on board. So we want to change the current model so that we use the capacity that is there in the private sector to deal with disasters. And Dr. Stolle has met a lot of them. So the MOU will facilitate for that to happen, not just warm bodies, but also equipments in and out of the country, as you put it. So we understand that perfectly. We will consult as we change the program with members of the committee, because I think there is a wealth of experience in this committee as well to advise us on how to manage the new model. On the organogram, again, that can be made available by Dr. Stolle, or the current organogram, how it's functioning, and the future organograms, because we're making changes in the current system and we're reviewing the frameworks and the legislation so that we can be a little bit more efficient. Chairperson, I think we've covered most of the comments and questions. and they're all intended to enhance the work that we're doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, honorable members. I think we have come to the end of this session. And if it can be noted, especially by officials, we are almost towards the end of our term. By implication, we are drafting a legacy report where we call you. It is also because we also want to plug in some gaps that we might have noted in what we are supposed to respond to in terms of the legacy report. But otherwise, thank you very much for the information and the clarities given to members. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chair.